Welcome to this video coverage of Tata Steel 2014. Let's have a look at round 4 played today. After a rest day, we have this new round in the A group, or how is it called? They have a new name for that, Masters or something. Alright, let's have a look at the games. We had 3 draws today out of 6 games, and I'm going to start with the draws and make it relatively brief. In the comparison, they're really far less interesting than the decisive games. So let's start. First game is Van Veli against Hari Krishna from India. Hari Krishna, I think, is the winner of the... Did he win the last year B group? No, that's Nidich, right? Alright, so let's see what happened. This game I will go through really quickly because it was a fairly uneventful affair. We have a Catalan with Queen C2 and A4. This line is actually a bit more... can you say ambitious than Queen takes C4? Yeah, maybe you can. At least it's a bit more complicated, this position type. But the way this is played now by both players, it really quickly fizzles out. Black has managed to put a knight on this nice square on B4 and the bishop on C6, which is nice because it opposes the strong Catalan bishop, and Black has fair control over the central squares. This looks like a decent setup for Black, but the way they both play it now, White plays bishop G5 and now bishop D5, White now is basically forced to capture on D5, and I think he should have avoided that somehow, as this structure after A5 is really very dull for White. I mean, okay, ultimately it's dull for both sides, but White really has a hard time to do anything here. It's very difficult to make any kind of progress in this position. How do you ever break in the center, for example? It's difficult, and this configuration on the queen side means that White is never having anything there. In the game, we have further exchanges. White quickly goes about getting rid of this B4 knight, which is very understandable. And we have a neat little trick here. After knight takes B4, of course, Black plays Queen B6 using the pin so that he does not really lose material. And here, it's simply nothing happening. In this position, E2 is hanging, but B4 is hanging as well, so not really a problem. And a couple of moves later, a draw was agreed. This is really a completely dead position. White has no break, Black has no break. They can play that on for ages, and it will always be a draw. So draw agreed here. Pretty dull affair. Next game to look at is Gelfand against Nidich, the German player here playing Black. And it's a King's Indian. Only recently Nidich has taken up this opening. It actually fits to his uncompromising style, but still a recent addition. Gelfand goes for the Averbach, but after knight A6, which is probably nowadays the main reply besides C5, he plays knight F3. So after those moves and E5, we basically transpose back into a classical King's Indian with an early bishop E3. And it's quite interesting, this line that Black is playing, knight G4. It's interesting. He's gained the move H6, so bishop G5 is not on at the moment. White needs to retreat. And after taking, he plays the somewhat crude looking move queen f6. But of course it has a point. This knight is simply hanging, and white needs to do something about it. Okay, this is also hanging, but yeah, something like bishop g4, or let's say black takes first here. Something like that is not really helping. Black has active play. He played knight b3 back. This makes more sense, attacking the knight. But now black simply plays queen h4. And yeah, white needs to react to the mate. He could take, but this gives black the bishops for no particular compensation. So bishop f4 is the move he played. And now knight plays the simple move bishop e5 and just exchanges bishops. After the trade, we get to a position where we have this typical pawn structure for the King's Indian. Those pawns opposing each other, and white having played c4, which means that white must be somewhat cautious that at the long run d4 being a weakness is not becoming an important factor. He really is in no trouble here because of his superior mobilization and piece coordination. But in general, this is a healthy structure. Black only needs to be cautious here with some concrete things. After h3, knight f6, knight d2. White intends to regroup the knight, but black, I think, has got adequate play. Plays rook d8. Yeah, and now knight d5. This simplifies things a bit. It's interesting in this position. Maybe queen c1 was an alternative, threatening knight f3. After bishop e6, knight f3, queen f4, for example, was an idea. The queen doesn't have many squares, but black can always play h5 to secure it. Maybe white is slightly better, but it's nothing too great. In the game after knight d5, we had some simplifications. c6 breaking up the d file. In this concrete line, we have some trades when at the end we have this configuration. Black will attack the pawn and use his activity, and yeah, he jettisoned the e-pawn to enter on b2. Yeah, we had some more trades. Oops, this was the position where they agreed to a draw. Yeah, there's absolutely no headway to make here for white. At first you think, okay, this is basically an extra pawn on d6 because this is doubled, but black has easy ideas to attack it, or maybe f5 and then approach the pawn. White cannot really use it, this pawn, doing much. It's really a very drawish position, so the draw is very understandable at this point. Okay, let's look at the third drawn game. Not spoiling much here, really. If you look at the games, they're not that exciting. In Geary against Wesley, so we had another Catalan. This is really popular in this tournament. It's a general popular opening, but we had many Catalans here. Okay, yeah, so is playing the closed Catalan with this insertion of bishop b4 check and retreating. The idea is, after bishop b4 check, and let me quickly go back, the idea is that white, of course, needs to interpose, and whatever he's doing, each reply has got some drawbacks. Knight c3, the drawback is that the knight is often not so well placed in connection with the capture here on c4, because this pawn is not so easy to recapture. The natural way is to move the e-pawn and take it like that, but then why have you played g3? If white plays knight d2, black can also take. And it's not easy to regain the pawn. Yeah, note that queen a4,
Check.
knight c6 does not help at all. Which means that this is basically the move that white is playing. And after bishop e7, this is really a bit of a misplaced piece. In the closed Catalan, like this with c6, very often this pawn becomes an issue, and the most convenient way to play it is normally b3 and to fianchetto the bishop, but now it's on d2. So you can try stuff like bishop to c3, knight d2, but it's just an inferior square compared to b2 because it is exposed on c3. So this is really a gain for black, this bishop placement on d2. Yeah, well, Giri plays with queen c2 and bishop f4 later. This is quite normal now. Once the bishop is on d2, an artificial fianchetto is not helping. And we had some pretty standard play. Yeah, some repetitions. But then white is doing something. Yeah, this position type is very standard in this line. White has gained the bishops, but the bishops are not terribly active at the moment, especially the g2 bishop is just biting on this pawn. Black has a slight problem here with the queen side, having given up his light squared bishop. This is a bit weak, but of course it's still a very solid position for black. We see that with this regrouping, he manages to block the center and improve his pieces. I don't think that black has anything special to fear here. However, in the game, after some further moves, they all look fairly normal. It seems that white got a little bit of pressure and actually managed to put some to pose some problems to black. In this position, it's not so easy to give black some advice. If he takes on b5, queen b5 is a very annoying answer. Rook c1 taking is not a check, so there's basically a triple attack. The queen is attacking here, it's attacking the bishop and the rook, so it's terribly overloaded. Black cannot take on b5. And what exactly is your move now? Need to be precise. He played knight to e8, but after the capture and those further moves, a7 got lost. And this certainly was not planned by Wesley so beforehand. He didn't really want to give up the pawn, but it was a bit too much pressure on the c-file. But it turned out that black with queen c1 and further activation got quite some counterplay. And I'm not sure that this is so easy for white to play. Took and played queen c3. The computer suggestion here is the much more aggressive move e4, but this is a move that is difficult to play for a human because bishop g5 looks like a very very tough reply with this possible activation. After ed5 is still this idea, and we always have opposite colored bishops, so it's not easy at all to win this position. Something like that can be an idea. Black has some counterplay. I mean, white is the only one really hoping for a win, but it's not easy at all. In the game, queen c3 was played, and it is quite similar. We get a similar position now. White has played e4 later, and now knight f6, also an idea to activate the knight. And I don't think that white's extra pawn on the queen side is really that important. His king is a bit a bit too weak, and
Check.
black got enough counterplay. Always note the opposite colored bishops, which are really an important factor in assessing this position as being really equal. Yeah, got a couple of more moves, but it's basically not much happening. All right, that was a brief overview of the draws. Now let's go to the decisive games. That much I can tell you as a spoiler. Let's start with Karjakin against a Report, the young Hungarian player who played such enterprising chess in the first 3 rounds, playing the Budapest Gambit and 1b3 in the first round. Okay, he's playing black against Karjakin, and we have a French defense. And Rapport plays all kinds of openings, so hard to prepare something specific. We have the winner, and in fact,
Check.
he plays a very, very rare line with Queen c7. This is very well forgotten line. The idea is that the queen is quite often decently placed on c7, and it has an additional and very specific idea against queen g4, especially considering that after knight e7, queen g4 is the main and problematic move for black. So black is playing that one in order to, after queen g4, have an f-pawn move ready, and if white plays a slow move here, like knight f3 for example, black can play knight e7 and transpose to the usual structures, or play b6, whatever. The queen on c7 is quite decently placed. Well, queen g4 is the critical move, and now he plays f6. This is even rarer in comparison to f5. This has been known for a very long time. Even was played in the 1960s by Tal and against Fischer, and we have Tal with white against Botvinnik and so on. So very old line. Reporter, however, he plays f6, which is even more obscure as mentioned. And that's quite interesting. It defends g7, of course, and it introduces the idea to capture. So it's a bit more aggressive than f5. After knight f3, he played c4. Yeah, this is to prevent, I guess, the bishop coming to d3. The drawback, of course, is that it closes the queen side and allows white to activate the bishop via a3 in an ideal world. a4, bishop a3, something like that. This, in fact, also would have been an interesting move now, trying to activate the bishop here. Karjakin has a far more straightforward idea. He just plays h4 and wants to use the bishop on f4. We get to that. Yeah, and bishop f4 here. This, however, is a debatable decision, and this is due to the move knight h5, which Rapport, strangely enough, is not playing. I mean, I really would have expected that to happen, but he played queen a5. An interesting move, not necessarily bad, but this was quite simple and interesting. Note that if white now moves the queen, so let's say here, playing simple moves, black can even consider to play rook f8, but you can also take e5. Let's say take. Not sure if white should exchange queens, so probably not. Takes. And now let's say queen a5. Black has got rook f8, and this bishop has, oops, not on e6, has ideas to go here, or even after the king has moved somewhere, bishop d7 and all the way to g6. It's very helpful that all knights are off in this position. Black only needs to make sure that this bishop is playing, then his nice pawn structure is really good for him. So this is not really the problem. I guess knight takes c6 is the main issue that he was afraid of, I guess. But after queen takes and this kind of here even castles is that isn't an idea. Let's say here. So this kind of position, maybe even rook f8. This also would have been interesting to play for black. It's not the greatest structure ever, but white is somewhat behind in development, and he needs to coordinate his pieces first. It's not that easy. It was interesting. Knight h5. He played queen a5, which is not bad as mentioned. It's a bit more enterprising, placing the queen on a4 and trying to get this counterplay. Here in this position, surprisingly enough, white did not take on g7, played king d1. I'm not really sure why he didn't take. I mean, I don't really see what the drawback is. You can take. Rook f8 is probably necessary, and then fairly normal move like rook h3 looks quite okay. I mean, this is an idea, or maybe rook to e3. It just has a useful role on the third rank to cover the important pawn on c3. Black should probably take, and then you see that this rook is nicely defending the pawn. I don't really see black's big idea. It's a bit mysterious, this game. I don't really know why he didn't take on g7. It looks like just being a good move. He played king d1 as mentioned, and after castles, black is threatening knight e4. I mean, this certainly is interesting for black. After f3 necessary, he played the very active move e5, and this is a move that for a stronger and more experienced player, it's quite obvious, this move, activating the bishop, but a move that weaker players sometimes struggle with, giving up an healthy, otherwise healthy pawn. But the piece activity is far more important. So e5 is a move I like. Bishop took and bishop f5. So black is active now with counterplay here, and he needed to cover that and played rook to a2. Yeah, it's probably what you need to do. If you cover it with rook c1, the a pawn is a constant worry. Yeah, black activates his pieces. But, he certainly does not have any particular problems. After f4, it's debatable what black should do. There's more than one good way to play. He decided to go this route. He also could have taken, which is not the most obvious idea, but it's interesting. If you take, f takes, then c5, and black has very concrete counterplay against the center and ultimately the king. It's not a very well coordinated position, but I understand his plan more. I mean, I prefer what Report played, but this was also an idea. He played knight f6 as mentioned to get it to e4. After bishop f3 and knight e4, we have this kind of position where both bishops are occupying really dominant positions. White of course has an extra pawn, and therefore is probably slightly for choice, but it's nothing that would worry me too much as black. it still looks very defensible with this excellent bishop. However, a couple of moves down the road, black plays a very strange move, and we see that coming up after queen g4. Exactly here, he played queen to a7, and this is a bit of a strange one and hard to understand. I am not quite sure what black's idea was. The problem with this move, I'll show it, is just rook b2, and now this rook has a nice b file and the entry square on b6, which is the main issue. Black has no tactical operation now to justify queen a7, and white will just invade on the b file. I really don't know what black's point was. He could have played yeah, well, everything else is better. He still could have tried a move like c5, for example, opening up, or if you go, let's say here, just basically playing sit and wait. There's nothing terrible happening. Contrary to the game, after queen a7, rook b2, and here this invasion, white is almost winning. I mean, black has a hard time to defend his pawns, and white is controlling the only really open file, so a bit weird. In fact, for a player of kayaking strength, so this is probably just a win. He activated
Check.
here with the rook and calculated that black only
Check.
has a couple of checks.
Check.
You can always escape.
Check.
Yeah, and here, okay, we get to an end game, but of course white is much better because it's g7 that's falling. It's just a tactical win.
Check.
Yeah, and here black resigned. There's nothing you can do against the combined forces of bishop, pawn, and rook. Let's say what should he play? Yeah, so, some move. Then white utilizes this additional force on the h file and just wins. A bit of a mysterious game. Yeah, and I'm not quite sure why he gave up the b file. It's probably based on some miscalculation. This is quite often the case. You see a move that on general grounds pretty quickly can be judged as critical, as problematic, and very often, of course, those very strong players, they are aware of the things happening to them after they've played the moves, and they got, how did I allow that? And very often it's based on a simple miscalculation that you think, okay, he cannot do that for some reason, and then you simply recognize that you just miscalculated something, and the planned move is not working at all. Yeah, so a win for kayaking against Report, who didn't really make the most out of his chances. Yeah, the next game I'm going to look at is Dominguez, Linier Dominguez from Cuba, against Fabiano Caruana. And yeah, here it is. And one issue with this game is that it is absolutely the longest game I probably ever covered on video. Maybe, not quite sure, but we're talking about more than 100 moves. So I need to adjust to this, and I'll briefly go through various structural changes in the game. If I look at each move, it will take ages. So just look at structures and transformations. We have Ruy Lopez and an early d3 by Dominguez. Nowadays the d3 lines in the Lopez are very popular due to the Marshall attack, basically. This is one of the various anti-Marshall systems. it does not promise white too much, but the attraction of playing 30 theoretical moves in the marshal and then only have a draw for white is really, really little. So this is a little bit like the Carlsen approach, to get a playable position and try to do something in a long, complicated game. Okay, b5 and d6 are fairly standard. a3, yeah, black was intending to get the bishop, so you need a square. With a3 or c3, you need to give a square to the bishop. Castles, knight c3, just developing. And bishop e6, very normal type of exchange to relieve some pressure. And we have some more moves. And now we see that white has gotten a doubled pawn. And now after knight d4 we have this funny structure where there are many pawns on the many pawns on the d file. And in fact this is a structure that is happening quite often in this line. So nothing really new. After a couple of more moves, we see that white has gained the a file, and in general I believe that white is slightly more comfortable here. It's the bishops, yes, but also the somewhat more comfortable structure with the a file being the main point of entry. After h3, h5, yeah, note that this pawn is hanging, but if black takes it, white has this this move. And after queen e5, he's even going to play f4, and well, this leads to material losses. Queen e6, rook e1, and ultimately the bishop is getting the knight. Black cannot take here, so h5. Note, no, he's playing against the g4 idea, and now white is playing rook a7 and h4. Yeah, note that after knight takes, it's the same. So h4 and queen f3. This is really an interesting decision. White is out of tactical tricks to cover the d5 pawn, so he needs to play queen f3 to yeah, make sure that this is not lost. At first it looks really weird, this pawn structure. White has doubled pawns, an isolated pawn. Black has a bit strange pawn on h4 and so on, plus this. So a very strange structure. It will always be a bit better for white simply because of the activity, 7th rank and so on. But black certainly has chances to hold the game, but it will be an uphill struggle. This is I think uncomfortable to play. I wouldn't really have liked it as black. And we see that after some more moves we have a further change in the position where black has activated his knight. Yeah, it's not really helping if white takes on a4. This needs to be checked. But after rook b5 at the end, this pawn is getting lost, and after that it's basically over with any ideas, because this frees up the c pawn and ultimately also makes sure that this bishop will get some more activity. Let's say here it does not need to cover the c pawn anymore. This is why white is not taking, so just bishop a3 and some more repeating. Yeah, not much happening, just a bit of shuffling, and now knight c5. Yeah, and the funny thing is, yeah, white really shouldn't take on c5, as this is just too little with the opposite colored bishops. So he needs to allow the capture on b3 and this is one of the weirdest pawn structures I think I've ever seen. White has doubled pawns, another double pawn, and h3 is also isolated. And still, the only player playing for win here is white. And this is because of piece activity and this weakness on b5. This is a weak pawn and a pawn that will get lost ultimately. Weak and a passive bishop. It's not fun at all for black. I'm not sure he should lose it, but it's yeah, as mentioned before, not a nice day at the office. Yeah, white got the pawn.
Check.
Yeah, f5 probably necessary in the long run. And yeah, white does not want to exchange rooks. It's a matter of timing. At the moment, it's better to have some more pieces on, but it's difficult in the long run. Yeah, without this move, you will not make any progress. But now white has some more ideas to activate, and we see that happening in the game. Yeah, rook e2 is the counterplay, so he exchanges rooks. And this endgame, I am not 100% sure that it is winning, but maybe it is. I mean, white has basically three weaknesses to play against. d4, h4, and the third weakness basically is that it's still an extra pawn, the b pawn, gaining also space and sort of tying the king to the c7 pawn. I'm not 100% sure that it is really losing. In the game it looks fairly convincing, this win, but not entirely sure. This is the problem. Zugzwang. The bishop cannot move without giving up one of the pawns, and if you move the king, then white makes progress with king a5. He in fact repeats and only now plays b6, and this is the key move.
Check.
That makes you, yeah, that allows you to make more progress. Again, and if the king moves, it allows white to enter, so you need to give up one pawn. Still, it's not so obvious how white should win, but he finds a nice way after getting the pawn. Even now, it's not entirely clear cut. The king here controls this entry squares, and yeah, well, okay, white has two pawns. It's 2 pawns up, but this pawn is not worth much at the moment. Not really. The only way to make anything happen here is white going to the king side, and yeah, you can repeat moves, and it's have all the time in the world. And now he's going over with the king. Yeah, like that. And there's no other way to make any headway than to play h4, and now even h5. Yeah, to get a passer or allow the entry, and this happens with bishop h4. The bishop trade is yeah, obviously losing directly. So after bishop d4, white plays bishop e7, and now we get the pawns. We have some transformation coming up. Yeah, and after bishop g1 and now bishop h2, move 108. Caruana resigned. White will play king e6 and just combine the f-pawn with winning the d6 pawn to win the game. Yeah, I believe that right out of the opening, Caruana got into a really uncomfortable structure. This structure here is not fun at all to play, and maybe he had some tougher defense, but I cannot really pinpoint where he should have defended differently. It's just in a practical game very tough to play. Alright, so only one game left, and this is the game between the world number 2 and the world number 3, Aronian against Nakamura. Let's get to this game. Okay, Aronian going for d4. Yeah, he usually plays closed openings, varying a bit between c4, d4, knight f3. So here it's d4, and Nakamura is going for the King's Indian. Oops, this was the wrong button. Going for the King's Indian, one of his main weapons, very sharp opening. So we can hope for an interesting battle. Aronian is playing the classical variation, one of his weapons against the King's Indian. He's played various lines over the years. He's played the G3 systems here, the classical, like here. But he also experimented with H3 lines, what I often play in Blitz. Yeah, well, here the classical, and he's playing with Bishop E3. This is not a very common choice in his games. Normally he's playing that, and he had played this against Nakamura before and won a nice game about 2 years ago, I think. And, here Bishop E3 is his choice. This is an interesting line that very often on an amateur level yeah, catches black players wrong-footed. Very often less experienced players go knight c6 here, which is a real mistake after d5, knight e7 and knight d2. This is White's ideal setup. Those bishops active, and now b4, c5 is coming with the knight supporting on c4. There are similar positions, of course, in the classical that are not terribly bad for black, but note that in those positions very often White has castled, and here White does not even castle. He just plays all those active moves and can keep the king in the center, so there's nothing to attack. Knight c6 is a real mistake that King's Indian players should know about. Okay, after bishop e3, black has various lines. He's going for knight g4. This is the most direct move, directly attacking this bishop and forcing the upcoming sequence. Bishop g5, f6, and now the bishop has a choice. It can also go all the way back to c1. This line has been popular in recent years, but is nowadays I think diffused. It's not so dangerous for black. I'm trying to remember why. I think it's even that one. This has been popular recently, with black activating his pieces. This is an important point with this bishop getting active. I think this is the reason why bishop c1 is a bit out of fashion. Okay, bishop h4, the main move anyway, and Nakamura plays here g5, bishop g3, and knight to h6. This is an old line against this opening. It's been played for years, and to be honest, I'm not quite sure what attracts black players to the system. because I mean, instead you can just for argument's sake, in this position, black has some other moves. He can play knight c6, for example, or maybe even knight a6. I'm not sure. What I'm getting at is that this line, yeah, it's a bit problematic due to yeah, what Aronian is playing. It's not like it's terrible for black, but it's just very uninspiring to play. If you play the King's Indian, you want a bit more fun, I guess. Let's see. What I'm talking about is he's going for c5, activating this bishop, and yeah, it's a bit tricky for black. What should he do now? I mean, if you take here, for example, d takes e5 is just terrible. You get completely destroyed in the center. If black takes here, yeah, there's even this move being interesting.
Check.
Yeah, this is very, very strong, supported by the bishop. And after g4, this is the main reply. Knight h4, knight c6. This has been played many times before. We almost by force get this endgame. Yeah. All those straights.
Check.
And now white gives this check and exchanges queens. So this position has been played numerous times. I understand that black is hoping for relief in the form that this knight on h4 is not ideally placed, and it's of course not controlling the d4 square. But on the other hand, the knight on h6 is also not great. Note that it cannot easily go to f7 because of the strong c4 bishop. And yeah, while the knight on h4 is not ideally placed, it always has this nagging idea to go to f5. So black must be very, very careful to not drift into a somewhat worse position. I think theory is quite optimistic here about black's play. But yeah, well, frankly, I don't like it too much. I mean, when I played the King's Indian as black, I tried to avoid those kind of positions where you're sort of a bit worse and you don't really have any active play. It's probably nothing terribly bad. I mean, I'm not criticizing this harshly, but it's not much fun to play. I guess maybe Nakamura underestimated the danger, but this is supported by the fact that after those moves here, yeah, with rook d8 here, he offered a draw, which it seems was quite a surprise to Aronian, and understandably so, because after the trade and bishop f2, it's clear that well, white will never make a draw in this position because it's just a little bit better. This bishop is stronger than this bishop, no doubt about that. And there's always this configuration with knight f5 being an idea and the knight badly placed on h6. Whenever it moves to f7, white goes to f5 and is very happy with that. It's just not fun to play at all. Played a6 and activated the king. Yeah, the bishop has been rerouted to e3. It on g3 it only looked at this pawn chain, not effective at all. While on e3 this is a nice post. You can even think about taking on h6, simply because this would secure the excellent f5 square. And at this point I think it's clear that Aronian is trying to get a position where he will have a superior knight on d5 or f5 against the weak bishop, and in fact this is what we're getting here.
Check.
And the knight is always having this in reserve. Yeah, that's really a nice position. Yeah, and here Nakamura played knight e6, which yeah, I think after the game he posted a message on Twitter that he thought for ages about this move, and it is not supported by the clock times. Well, that's curious. 2 minutes and then 50 minutes. Yeah, it's a bit strange what the clock times are telling me. But what I'm getting at is that knight e6 seems to lose the game. He could have played a tougher defense with king g6. It's very, very uncomfortable playing against those excellent knights and with those weaknesses here. But this is what he should have done. After knight e6, white has a simple move that Aronian didn't play. I guess he misjudged the consequences of it. It seems that white can simply take on b7. This, in fact, looks a bit scary because of knight f4 and knight takes h3 because, well, it's an h pawn, and those are always very tricky, the flank pawns. If you have a knight, be aware that those pawns are quick and dangerous. But here it seems that white is just quicker. If you look at this b4, let's say h5, a4, h4, b5.
Check.
It's just much quicker. And let's say after h3, there's always knight g3 to h1. If everything else fails, you can stop the pawn in this manner. It seems that white is winning relatively easily if he takes on b7. However, Aronian took on e6. Quite to Nakamura's surprise, it seems. And here, while white is of course still more comfortable, it's clear that the other line was just a flat-out win. And here it's not clear if it's really winning. I mean, I had very similar positions quite often out of the exchange King's Indian. This can easily happen out of this line, this type of structure. And it's, while it looks really, really terrible, this great knight against the stupid looking bishop, it's not so easy to win. I mean, the computer, just to mention it, gives it as a dead draw, but I'm not so convinced, because it's still much nicer to be white. But it's very difficult to defend in a practical game. That much is clear, and we see that quite quickly after this h5, e5. That quite quickly now Nakamura makes a mistake exactly in this position. Here he must play, and this is necessary. He must play king to f7. There's not much else that he can do. He played king d7, but this is just directly losing, and it's by force. After knight g7, h4, what else? Yeah, it's an attack. Needs to cover it. And then after knight e3, knight c4, knight takes a5. White is winning the decisive a pawn. The difference is that the king is now on d7 and there's no counterplay at all. If he would have gone here, there's no knight g7. This is the first thing to note. If you look at this, yeah, this is of course still good for white, but now there's king g6. And it's not clear how white is ever getting this knight to c4. You can try, of course, to go via f5 d6, but well, this is stupid anyway, losing time. But the point is that there's this counterplay. Yeah, let's say here. And if white now tries to get to the pawn, he's losing the h-pawn and even losing the game. So he could have defended much more stubbornly with king to f7. As mentioned, after that we had this knight regrouping, winning the a-pawn. So Nakamura certainly not very satisfied with this game. He sort of drifted into an inferior end game, and then after Aronian didn't take the pawn on b7. Maybe Nakamura really had good drawing chances, but didn't take them. Yeah, so after 4 rounds, if I'm not mistaken, Aronian is leading the tournament. Probably shared first place. I'm not completely sure. Somehow my browser is not working. It's not starting. I want to look up the standing. Well, okay, you can easily look up the standing on the official website or other chess news sites. Yeah, this was round 4 coverage. I'll be back tomorrow with round 5. Thanks for watching, and yeah, until tomorrow. Bye.